This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Students on U.S. college campuses are changing. Today, more than 1 in 5 college students are parents, nearly 4 million people. How do they juggle earning a degree and raising kids? Today, Where We Live, we explore this with author Fiona Pearson. She's a sociology professor at Central Connecticut State University who's written the book Back in School: How Student Parents Are Transforming College and Family. Now, coming up, we'll hear from student parents completing their degrees in Connecticut. We'll also find out how other states are responding to the needs of this student population. Are you one of them? You can join us. The number 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WMPR. Or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I want to welcome Fiona Pearson into our studio. Again, she's sociology professor at Central Connecticut State University and author of this book. One of the reasons why we're talking about it, student parents today. Fiona, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I was when I was reading your book, I chuckled at the title of the first chapter. It's called "We're Not Living in the Old School Anymore." So I mentioned you're a professor. How long have you been teaching, and how have you seen the demographics in your classes changing?
I've been teaching since the early 90s. And the first institutions I taught at, I was teaching very traditional age students. But in 2000, I began this project. At that time, I was pregnant with my first child, and at that time, I was working towards my doctoral degree, and I was interested in beginning to explore the effects of welfare reform in 1996. And in particular, I was interested in how welfare policy and some of the reforms that took place in 1996 was beginning to change the opportunities for students who were parents specifically. Because with welfare reform, before 1996, it was an entitlement program, which meant that as long as a parent was under a certain income, they qualified for the cash public assistance. After 1996, the program became a state block program where states became responsible for administering the grants. And it became a workfare program, a job fair program, which meant that students who were enrolled in those public assistance programs now had to look for low-wage labor, look for jobs in order to qualify even for the cash assistance, which meant that students who were parents who were previously pursuing their college degrees and applying for these programs could no longer qualify for that program unless they worked an additional 20 hours as well. And if you're a parent, particularly a single parent, and you're required to work 20 hours a week for your cash assistance and you're attending college full-time, and I tell my students now, college is a full-time job. If you're attending school full-time, that's 15 hours in class time and an additional 35 hours outside of study and prep time. That's a full-time job. Those student parents couldn't do it. And so I was interested in researching some of those experiences of student parents at that time.
And so how did you reach out to some of these students because you wanted to learn more about what they were juggling, but also for them to be open enough to talk about very candidly about what their lives were like? And obviously you're a sociologist, so you've got some tricks in your toolkit, so to speak.
It helped in 2000 that I was pregnant. So it helped when I met with student parents. I was visibly pregnant. And actually, that was a way of establishing rapport early on. We started off our conversations sharing the best diapers, the best daycares in the area. So that was a way of breaking in. And so that was my doctoral research, and that was down in Atlanta, Georgia. And this was soon after welfare reform had happened. So I was also interested in looking at how some of those policies were trickling down to the front lines. Oftentimes changes made at the federal level in terms of legislation, but we don't know how that's going to actually look on the ground in public assistance offices. And so that's what I was exploring then. In 2004, I moved up to Connecticut. And at that time, I was finishing up that work. I had collected all that data. I was finishing dissertation. I finished that up in 2006, had a second daughter in 2004. And then in 2006, when I finished that, my program and had my degree in hand, I was applying for tenure-track positions, and that's when I started at Central Connecticut State. I wanted to continue my project with student parents at that time, but what I was finding I couldn't find the student parents who were receiving TANF in Connecticut that I was finding back in Atlanta, Georgia. And there were a few reasons for that. One, in 2005, the TANF policy was reauthorized, and it restricted the opportunities for students who were pursuing degrees. So there were no students who were receiving TANF or in the state of Connecticut's TFA, Temporary Family Assistance cash benefits, and attending college. Basically, they had been steered away from college and were instead pursuing jobs so that they could continue to qualify for those benefits.
Who steered them away?
The program, the rules of the program itself, because of the requirements, those work requirements, case managers. And part of my original project, I also interviewed case managers down in Atlanta. But case managers themselves were very divided about how they felt about those programs. And some were willing to work with students in terms of find job preparation programs that could also qualify for their college education and kind of work the system, if you will. But most of them just said, no, you need to drop out of school. You need to get a job if you want this assistance, or you have to figure out school on your own, which is what happened to some of the students in my sample is they just decided to not even apply for those benefits, even though they qualified.
I imagine trying to go to school full-time and also juggle a job to fit the job requirements and raising children. It's impossible to do all of those things. So when you were talking with student parents, did you see that the time it took for them to finish a degree took much longer than what we call traditional students?
Well, in my sample, I had students that I interviewed ranging in age from 18 to I think the oldest was 54. And so those students had a variety of experiences. Some of those students were teen parents and had continued straight from high school and were in college and had not yet taken a break, at least at that point in their college career. Many of those parents, however, had stopped out over the years. Many of them may have started back in the 1990s or early 2000s, stopped out for various reasons, taking care of children, having to work to pay bills, and came back later. So there was great variety within my sample, too, in regards to the ages and the experiences.
In studio with me is Fiona Pearson, a sociology professor at Central Connecticut State University, author of the book Back in School, How Student Parents Are Transforming College and Family. You can join our conversation, especially if this fits your description, if you're working as well as raising children and going to school. You can join us. The number 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. When we were researching doing this show, we hear and see the description that student parents are often an invisible population on campus. Why is that, Fiona?
Yes. It takes a great deal of courage for student parents to come out as parents on campus for a variety of reasons. As I mentioned in my sample, some of my students were very young student parents. And they very much were fearful of the stigma of having been a teen parent and how individuals on campus, their student peers, their professors might evaluate and potentially stigmatize them as a result of the fact that they had their first child when they were teenagers. And older students similarly found stigma in the classroom in that they were fearful of playing what one parent called the parent card, feeling like they need special exceptions in the instance when a child is sick or in the instance when a student needs to ask for an extension because family members needed tending to. And they were fearful of coming out as student parents for some of those reasons.
We hear, looking at the statistics, many of the student parents nationwide, the majority of them are women of color. But when you're talking with male students, tell us more about some of that stigma that you were just mentioning.
Absolutely. Where I found there were 10 fathers who I interviewed for this study, and where men tended to face most of the stigma was actually in the household and at the home. I have an entire chapter where I explore student parents navigating home life and trying to help their family understand the importance of what I refer to as educational labor. When a student is sitting reading a book on the couch for class, it looks like leisure. It can look like pleasure. And so oftentimes family members would not necessarily see the time that student parents were spending on homework as valuable. And for the men in particular, student or extended family members often would explicitly confront some of the men in my sample regarding their going back to school and not necessarily working and earning an income. So taking their job as breadwinner and having someone in the household instead take on that responsibility, or turning to student loans for income in the household. And so extended family members would challenge the masculinity of some of those men in regards to their breadwinner role.
When we again look at the demographics of student parents, are they more likely to attend a 2-year versus a 4-year school?
They are more likely to be enrolled in community colleges, yes. The vast majority of student parents are enrolled in community colleges, but we do see a significant percentage of students in our 4-year universities. They, as you cited before, are often invisible because they are often fearful of bringing children to campus, and particularly on those college campuses where there isn't, for example, a daycare or childcare center, there isn't a presence of children on campus, then that will prevent parents from bringing their children to campus, even if visiting with a professor, for example. I make sure in my office I have coloring books and crayons, pictures that my daughter has painted over the years, and that creates an environment where students know that they are accepted, but that's not the norm across the college campus. That's not a traditional office.
Again, you can join our conversation. The number 888-720-9677, or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I should mention also in studio with me is a student parent, Brandy Solito, a graduate student at Central Connecticut State University. Brandy, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So we just heard a snapshot from some of Fiona's research and talking with students that she's had over the years. You're someone who has been trying to earn a degree, or now you're earning your graduate degree while also balancing family. So tell us a little bit about your background, and when did you have your child?
I was a teen mom. I had my son. I was 17, and it was very difficult. I was not able to graduate traditionally to get my high school diploma, and so I had to start taking night classes. My son was born in June. I was scheduled to graduate, and so I left the school and started taking night classes for the GED program. And so it took me about 2 years to complete that program just to get my GED. And so then I mainstreamed right into the community college. And we were based in New York at the time. And it was, like Fiona said, it's a very challenging. I had to be very proactive. We didn't have social media back then. My son's now 20. But so I just had to be very proactive in networking and, speaking to my professors and looking for, any way to be able to balance all of it. My son came to a lot of classes with me. When that viral video went, with the professor, bouncing the baby during a lecture, I mean, my son and I laughed because I was like, oh, that was us. And so, I had to, bring him to school, and it was very challenging to balance it all.
How did you see your professors, even your fellow classmates, responding to you when you did have to bring in your son at times?
It was totally mixed. Some professors were just like, so proud, and you're great. My grades were very strong, so a lot of professors were very supportive of me, and I was able to bring my son to class with me. And then there were others that were just, completely not acceptable of it, and found that it was a distraction to the other students, and that it was not a place for a child to be. So it was definitely mixed. I was lucky enough to work on campus, so I was able to bring him with me on campus pretty much everywhere. And so the professors that did not want to see him in class, I had secretaries down in the admins or Broussard's office that he made. I would bring him down there.
So what kept you going, Brandy? Given the fact that I understand you didn't have any family support, so you're really doing this on your own. And it's one thing to go to college or university and try to deal with the course load, but as you mentioned, you were also balancing a young child. Why didn't you give up?
It was always my dream to finish school, and employability was major for me. I always just knew without a degree I would not be able to make the most income that I needed to survive. And when he was younger, I did jobs like cleaning houses and dog walking and being a personal assistant, and jobs where I could bring him to work with me. And I just knew that I needed to finish my degree to be able to, be a homeowner and to be able to make enough income to survive and to take care of him properly.
We're going to continue our conversation here on Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. As we focus on student parents, the number of student parents across the country is steadily increasing. How are colleges and universities responding to this particular student population? You can join our conversation, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're talking about student parents. More than 1 in 5 college students are parenting children today, and more than half of them are single parents. How have college and university campuses responded to these so-called non-traditional students? We're exploring that question and more. You can also join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Right now in studio with me is Fiona Pearson, sociology professor at Central Connecticut State University and author of the book Back in School, How Student Parents Are Transforming College and Family. We also heard from Brandy Salido, a graduate student at Central Connecticut State University. And before we continue talking to student parents, I did want to ask you, Fiona, about support for student parents on campuses. We heard from Susan in West Hartford, who says that she attends UConn, where there's no support for student parents whatsoever. So can you talk to us about the resources that are available, and do they vary depending on if someone's at a community college, a state university, like UConn?
Absolutely. No, there's great diversity. And one of the problems, the student parents who are a part of the show, we're talking about this as we were waiting in the green room, is the lack of coordination in terms of communication about the resources that are available on various student campuses. So, for example, I know that several years back I went, and after the CCSU system consolidated. That's the 12 community colleges and the 4 CSU universities in Charter Oak. Michelle Van Cor, a colleague of mine at Southern Connecticut State, and I met with the then provost at the Board of Regents to talk about how we might best coordinate information about some of the resources that are available for our student parents within the system. We thought that maybe now that we were this new system, this was something that we could coordinate and work on. And I remember in that meeting very, very vividly the then provost saying, well, from what I see, all of those campuses have childcare. It's taken care of, as if that box had been checked. And I remember looking down and then thinking, well, you have to look more closely in terms of what resources are provided. So, for example, Southern Connecticut State does have a child care reimbursement program. It comes out of student affairs. It's $500, and so students can apply for reimbursement for care off campus because there is no on-campus care. But it's not a program that's widely promoted or students don't know about it. And that, I wouldn't say, is childcare, although that checked a box and ticked a box. Yes, we provide childcare. A $500 reimbursement doesn't comprehensively cover all the needs of childcare.
Maybe a week of childcare.
Maybe. Another example, at Central Connecticut State, we do have a early learning program. I'm president of the board of directors and have been for some time for our early learning program, which provides pre-K care for children ages 3 to 5. But it only provides care for up to 26 children, and the center is located off campus. So when we talked earlier about visibility, it's not visible on campus. But 26 slots doesn't nearly address the full comprehensive child care needs of student, faculty, and staff at CCSU. I can guarantee you that. And it only provides care for children ages 3 to 5. So again, a box may be ticked. Yes, Central has child care, but no infant care, no toddler care, and only for 26 children. So in terms of what resources are available, this is something I think we are working on, and we have place for movement. This is something, and because of, and I know we're going to talk later in the program about some of the grant opportunities that have been made available at the federal level. Because of some of those opportunities, we are seeing some expanding resources at our community colleges and our state universities in the state of Connecticut.
You can join our conversation, 888-720-9677. Joshua is calling from Manchester. Joshua, you're on the show.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, what's your question or comment?
My comment is in response to what our colleges could do to support parent students. One thing that I've found in my research is kind of going through the faculty route and seeing what instructors are doing in the classroom. And one thing that I found is that they're breaking up the academic work throughout the semester. Instead of having these high-stake exams or papers where it requires, multiple hours to get it done, parents or people that work just don't have that time. So what faculty are doing is kind of breaking it up throughout the semester so they could dedicate an hour to, instead of 3, 4, 5 hours to get that paper done. So instead of one 25-page paper at the end, you do a couple papers throughout the semester or a couple small exams throughout the semester.
Mm-hmm. And are you talking about at community college level? This is what you're seeing professors doing?
Yes, and at the 4-year level as well. So, having a lot of more parents, a lot of people working, they just don't have the time to dedicate to the traditional way of educating college students, and that's those high-stakes exams or papers. It just doesn't work for these students. So then they drop out by a semester in. Once they get that big exam in, they don't do really well because they just don't have the time to dedicate to it. They start dropping out. So instead, you break it up throughout the semester.
Well, thank you, Joshua, for your call. I just wanted to get Fiona Pearson to respond.
Yes,
is this becoming more of a trend?
Well, what Joshua described is actually better pedagogy. So it's not just for student parents. That approach benefits all students. And so rather than high-stakes exams, high-stakes projects, a process which is referred to as chunking, taking different projects and building throughout the course of the semester, setting deadlines throughout the 15 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on how long the semester is that a student is enrolled in. Students learn better that way anyway. So absolutely, Joshua, agree. And I hope all professors out there are listening.
Also in studio with me is, again, Brandy Solito, a graduate student at Central Connecticut State University. Brandy, I understand you lead a group for student parents called It Takes a Village. Why did you decide to put this support group together?
When the Women's Center at CCSU there was a volunteer position available on campus. And so when I went in there and started out, she had just asked, what groups or what programs would you like to bring? And so I just told her my story, how I was a student parent, and I would love to pay it forward and help other students. Because in some of my classes, I had colleagues that were parents, and you'd see them rushing in, and because all of the grad classes are in the evenings. So I just saw that, and so the Women's Center allowed me to develop a group that would help bring some support for my student parents on campus. And for me, I was just really excited about the topic. I lived it, and so I was hoping that it would bring some relief to the parents on campus.
Do you hear often from them about trying to balance and figure out childcare, or is it the course load? I mean, what are some of the common concerns that you hear? Oh,
absolutely. So I sent out a questionnaire in the beginning because it was this whole pilot program. It was brand new. We've never had one on campus before. So I had sent out questionnaires to see what the student parents were looking for, and it was all a mix of, childcare issues was major. They wanted to actually learn about empowerment was huge across the questionnaires. They wanted to learn time management, even financial skills. A lot of the students were interested in learning how to just balance budget, how to balance all of that, and so it was just a broad array. Self-care came up a lot. I was really excited to be able to help on campus.
You can join our conversation again as we look at student parents on college campuses. 1 in 5 undergrads are going to school while raising a family. The number to join our conversation, 888-720-9677. I wanted to bring in another perspective from a student parent here in Connecticut. Katia Samilian is joining us now. She's currently at Southern Connecticut State University, finishing up her degree in public health. Katia, welcome to the show.
Hi, it feels good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, right now I'm going to Southern. I'm studying public health. I do have a son. He's 5 years old. He recently did get a diagnosis of ADHD, so we're kind of working right now with his school on trying to get a plan right now for transitioning into first grade. So, he gets like physical therapy, OT, like a bunch of different stuff that we're working with his teachers. So right now it's just me and him that we live together. My mom passed away a couple years ago, and then my dad also passed away a couple years ago, so it's honestly just me and him. I had him back when I was 21, so it was like a couple years ago. And like at the time I started off at going to Housatonic. I graduated there. I got my associate's degree in medical assisting. Then I wanted to continue going into like the health field, so then I went and transferred over to Southern, started doing public health. I do have like the issue a lot since I don't really have that great of a support system, where I usually end up bringing him to classes with me in the evenings, because right now he's in kindergarten, so he goes to kindergarten in the morning, then he gets off at daycare. Usually the daycare closes at 6, so if I have a class like starting around 5 p.m. or something, I have to go and pick him up. Like I'll leave work, I'll pick him up, and then I got to take him to class with me and stay for the evening course. So I've had that problem for like the past couple of months. Before I had a little bit more involvement, but then that kind of like broken off, and so now it's just kind of like me relying on myself. I have to take him with me. My professors have been pretty understanding. I did have like one professor who was kind of iffy about it when she saw him the first time. She was just like, she thought it was a one-time thing, and then she saw me bring him back the next time. She was just like, oh, she kind of addressed me like before class started. She was like, I don't know what the situation is, but you have to find someone to watch him. I was like, it's kind of hard to find someone, because as a single parent and you don't have like a family support, I don't have like parents or like, grandparents or anyone to really be able to, hey, I'll watch your son while you go to class. So, I tried to look into finding someone to help watch him. It was really tough. I wasn't able to. So the next time I did miss class. I didn't attend class. I sent her an email. I was like, hey, sorry, I found nobody to watch him. I'll just reach out to someone for notes. Then the next time I was just like, I can't miss class again. So I ended up coming back with him. And, she was just like, oh, you're back again? I'm like, yeah, don't really have anyone to watch him. I was like, he's really quiet. He's behaved. We sit in the back. So, at that time she didn't really mind. Like I brought him in for my final exam. I brought him in for like just class sessions and everything. My other professors were totally understanding. They was like, yeah, we don't mind. He's quiet. He's good. We love him. He likes to laugh and stuff. So they didn't mind.
So that one professor was the exception.
Yeah, she was the one exception. Majority of other professors that I had throughout the semester did meet him before, so they were okay with it. Most professors are pretty understanding of my situation because they already know, and being in their class, my grades are pretty good. So I was like, you do good. Your son's, his behavior is great. He's well mannered.
Well, can I ask you, Katia, since you started your education at Housatonic and now you're at Southern, did you feel like you knew or heard of more resources to help you when you were at the community college level versus the state university? Can you compare the two?
Honestly, no. When I was at Housatonic, being there, I felt like I knew it inside and out. I knew all of the services that were offered to me. I was a part of an amazing program called FESP there. I was able to get like scholarships, awards. But then when I transferred over to Southern, I had no idea because it was a bigger campus. I didn't really know anyone there. So when I actually found out about the child reimbursement program, it actually was until like last semester, but it was way too late after the deadline for when I was able to apply that I actually found out about it. So I was just like, I didn't even know they had that. I didn't even know they had like emergency funding, like different financial things that were able to help out people who needed it. It's not broadcasted on campus, so no one really knows about it. So when I found out about it, I was like, I had no idea. And so now I'm trying to see if I could take advantage of it for my last upcoming semester, seeing as my classes are all in the evening. So I'm trying to figure out if I can get a part of that program, because if not, it means I have to take my son with me to class in the evening. And like one of the days that I'm there, I'm going to be there for like 5 hours, and I don't feel like he would be comfortable sitting with me for 2 classes for 5 hours a week. So it's just I'm trying to see if I can get a part of that.
I wanted to bring Fiona Pearson back into the conversation again. She's the author of the book Back in School, How Student Parents Are Transforming College and Family. In your book, Fiona, you mentioned as a professor, a sociology professor, having very candid conversations with some students who were trying to figure out, how am I going to navigate all of this? And you asked them, why do you want to get a degree, or what are your goals and ambitions? And so I'm curious, when you talk with student parents, whether it's in your class or for your research, what value do they see getting this education for them at this particular point in their lives?
Yeah, and it's a complicated answer to that, and that ended up being a separate objective of this book. As a researcher, you start off with questions that you hope to answer, and usually throughout that process, new questions emerge. And one of the new questions that emerged as I progressed in this research was what is the value? What do students want out of this experience? And that turned into an entire chapter. And it was based on questions that I asked of students about their aspirations, their educational aspirations, but also their expectations, their education. What do they expect of a college education? And I found in my interviews 3 different types of students emerged. And this applies not just to student parents, but to, I think, all students. And one group of students I categorize as the job seekers. And these are students who are, when I ask them about their educational aspirations and expectations, their answers are all about economic security. I want economic security. I want what we refer to in sociology as human capital. I want skills that will get me a job that will compensate me so I can sustain my family. And so that group of students tended to focus purely on jobs and skills and economic security in their answers, or what I refer to as credentialing, getting that piece of paper. I need that piece of paper. I've been treading for so long. I need that piece of paper. Another group emerged that I called the practical explorers. And this group of students also talked about jobs, but they talked about jobs a little differently. They didn't talk about it purely in terms of economic security. They talked about wanting jobs that were fulfilling. They had parents who had jobs that they hated going to, and they wanted to enjoy their jobs. They wanted fulfillment from their employment. And this group of students also tended to talk about what we refer to as cultural capital or social capital. They were interested in being learned people, being able to talk well, gaining respect in their community and in their family. Or social capital, social networking, and getting to meet people and know people, because they know that your future depends not just on what you know, but who you know. So that group of students was interested in job, but it was a more expansive understanding of job. And then the third group of students is that group of students that any liberal arts college president is familiar with, and I refer to them as the self-reflective learners. They didn't talk about jobs at all. When I asked them about their career goals, they had career goals and aspirations. But when I asked them about education, they talked about creative thinking, helping their children to see the world in new ways. They talked about becoming self-empowered. Brandy talked before about empowerment. I had one student who I interviewed, Rose, who was first generation, Turkish, Muslim, in an arranged marriage, and her husband was addicted to gambling and didn't love her. Mm-hmm. And she was in school studying to be a counselor in psychology, and she talked about how her psychology classes and the knowledge she was gaining was helping her to understand her husband's addiction, helping her to understand her faith, helping her to understand her role as a woman, a Turkish woman, her ethnic heritage. And this was helping her to help her daughter navigate these experiences. And so what she was gaining, when she talked about education, she talked about these issues of empowerment. Job was something she wanted because she was hoping eventually that her education would provide her with a means of addressing her life in a way that would allow her to move her and her daughter to a place that would be better. But these three types of students emerge. And I guess in terms of thinking about long-term effects, my only concern, all three are completely valid objectives in terms of what students might expect from their education. But I was most concerned about those student parents who were job seekers because and didn't have the resources they needed. If you were a job seeker and you had resources, if you were a job seeker and you had a partner who could help you with income or a family member who could help you with childcare or income, and you had the resources you needed to navigate the system, you were fine. But if you were a job seeker and you're not connected to your student identity and you don't have those support resources, you are more likely to leave without your degree and likely with some debt. So of all the groups, I was most concerned about those job seekers with few resources.
Brandy Salita, I wanted to ask you, as we hear from Fiona Pearson, as she talked to many student parents about, again, their aspirations. You're a graduate student at Central, again, balancing raising a son, thinking about empowerment, as you mentioned earlier, but also the fact that college is expensive. And you also have to support your family. And at the end of the day, you want to get a job that is able to pay the bills. I mean, how do you resolve all of those concerns as you try to keep going each day?
It's definitely a juggle and mind balance, and you just have to know what you want. And I was fortunate enough with my career that I was self-employed and I was, started making really good money, and but always knew in the back of my mind that, the degree is like Fiona has said, like I wasn't at that point no longer job seeking for my degree, but it was, I just wanted to be. I was a teen mom, so I wanted to be empowered. I wanted to know about the world. I wanted to feel, less inferior when speaking to colleagues or, out in the world. Just, I wanted to understand what was going on. And so that's what drove me to continue to keep going and balancing it. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. If you don't have the resources, you're taking out loans, you're taking out, child care costs. A lot of student parents that I've learned in my group that I run on campus is that they're actually taking out student loans to pay for daycare, to pay for their rent, groceries. And so if you don't really have a set goal as to what you're getting out of it, like Fiona said, like if you know that at the end of this you're going to have a job, you're going to be able to pay back your loans, that you're going to go on that course, you can get through it. But if you're like, I don't even know what I want to be when I grow up, I don't know what this job is going to bring, you don't know what kind of income you're going to be able to get to pay back the cost of your education, it could be just very frustrating. And then, some just end up leaving with major debt and then still no job. And so
I wanted to ask you, Brandy, also Katia, before we run out of time, policymakers do listen occasionally. Looking back at your education in Connecticut, what's one or two things that the legislature could do to help student parents like yourselves? I'll start with you, Brandy.
I think being able to allow the resources to be easily understood. A lot of my parents in the groups that we run, they like Fiona said, they just didn't even know. They don't know what their Title IX rules are. They don't know what their rights are. So policymakers need to make it clear, even upon admission, there should maybe be a box that you check. Yes, I'm a parent. Yes, these are, just another information that could be helpful so that they say, okay, you're going to get these newsletters or you get these resources available to you easier.
And Katia, one thing that you would like to see change for student parents?
I feel like they should be able to give out more sources, like resources for student parents to be able to have for situations. I feel like it's not widely known. And then I know with financial aid, it differs upon people. I know several student parents who didn't qualify for for financial aid because of financial situations, even though it says that they make too much money, they don't really make enough money. So they don't get enough funding for school, and then they end up taking a lot of loans and stuff to pay for groceries and for food because they're not able to work because they're also trying to focus on their education. So there's a lot of disadvantages where I feel like it should be directed more, where they should be able to address situations like that and just be able to like work more with like student parents directly to kind of figure out in communities like what do student parents need to actually figure out what's going on in their lives and understand their situations.
Well, I want to thank you, Katia Samilian, a current student at Southern Connecticut State University, finishing up your degree in public health. We wish you the best of luck. We appreciate you coming in today on Where We Live.
Thank you.
Also here with us, Brandy Solito, a graduate student at Central Connecticut State University. I should mention your son is also going to be graduating soon?
Yes, ma'am. He'll have his bachelor's, and I will have my master's at the same time. It'll be pretty fun.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Fiona Pearson will stay with us as we broaden out and see how other states are responding, again, to this change in student population at college campuses and universities around the country. We'll continue our conversation after the break. You can join us, too. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we've been talking about student parents. Sophie writes on Facebook, I started my grad degree 2 months after having my first child. It was harrowing, to say the least. I'm now in my third year of graduate work, and I struggle with consistent childcare, sporadic class schedules, postpartum depression, and burnout. I would say that individuals in my program have been mostly supportive, but the university system often does not seem to consider the issues that parents face. We wanted to broaden out our discussion to trends nationwide. And so joining the conversation now by phone is Lindsay Reichland-Cruz, study director of the Institute for Women's Policy Research in Washington, D.C. She's been studying student parents for several years. Lindsay, welcome to our show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we heard from Fiona Pearson earlier about grant programs that are available at some universities, but not all, or some community college campuses. Tell us about federally. I understand there's something called C-Campus grants. You've called that grant a drop in the bucket. Why does it fall so short?
Yeah, well, C-Campus, when I say a drop in the bucket, I definitely don't want to understate the importance of this program for student parents across the country. It's a vital source of financial support for campus child care centers, as well as campuses that don't have child care centers but want to provide some financial help for student parents to afford child care. It is, however, very small. It only serves, at this point, around 300 campuses around the country, and according to our calculations, just a small fraction of the total estimated need for childcare among students with children. So it has a long way to go in terms of better meeting the need, but it partially that's because it's operating in a broader broken childcare system in this country. And there are a number of federal programs that do help low-income families afford childcare, and C-Campus is one that just happens to be targeted at the student-parent population. So, again, can't understate how important it is, but if it were stronger, we would see, more help for more student parents around the country.
And I'm curious, Lindsay, when you mention these other programs that are available to help parents, are policymakers under the impression because these other programs exist that they are filling the need or helping these individuals find support, but because of eligibility requirements, that people aren't able to access them?
Yeah, so there are large federal programs, the Head Start federal program, the Child Care Development Block Grant, which are billions of dollars in funding. But as you stated, they often have rules for eligibility that can make it hard for parents in education and training to access them. And we heard Fiona talk a little bit about the rules for TANF recipients in education and training, and that is echoed through the child care subsidy programs as well. So work requirements or limitations on the type of degree you can be receiving while you're getting help for child care, among others, can be prohibitive for student parents to access the help they need to get that convenient, reliable, safe place for their kids to be while they're in school or studying or going to work.
Meryl's calling in from New Britain, who's part of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance. Meryl, you have something to add in terms of the subsidies available to adults who are trying to get their degree and also balancing family?
Right. Connecticut is one of 2 states in the country that has no provision for parents who are in school to use the child care subsidy program. We are one of the most restrictive in the country on that. And there is an effort to try and change that. Last year, the Education Committee in the legislature passed Senate Bill 934, which would change that, allow students to be eligible. But it did not get called in the.
So it looks like you're hoping to try again this session. But
Yeah.
Meryl, thank you for letting us know about that issue here in Connecticut. Before we run out of time, Lindsay, I wanted to ask, are there other states that Connecticut could look to as a model, maybe even particular universities that are responding to this student population specifically?
Yeah, and I appreciate that caller letting us know about Connecticut's restrictive rules. There are some states like Kentucky, for example, or Georgia that have recently removed some of the restrictions on parents in college to receive child care subsidies. So some even red states are removing these restrictions and expanding the eligibility for parents in education and training to get child care help. So I think those are great models to follow. We're also seeing new investments in states like New York and Pennsylvania that have recognized a particular need among single parents in college, and they are starting pilot programs to understand how campuses can invest in strategic supportive services for students with children, particularly single parents, to help them make it to graduation day. So it's been really exciting to see both those states kind of take intentional investments in these populations. We've also seen expanded funding in California, $97 million of an increase in Cal Grants for students with children, for example. And there are some states that have longstanding, if underfunded programs like Minnesota and Oregon, both of which have specific child care grants for students with children. So there are some states that are doing some good work, and there are more examples of states who are using TANF or SNAP to support the child care needs and other needs of eligible students with kids. We need to get to a place where the system as a whole does this as a matter of course. We need to be building a system that's adapted to the college students of today, many of whom are actually parents.
Well, I want to thank Lindsay Reichland-Cruz for joining us, study director at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. We'll link to your research on our website, wnpr.org/where we live. Fiona Pearson still with me, again, Central Connecticut State University professor, author of this book, Back in School, How Student Parents Are Transforming College and Family. We just got under a minute and a half left, Fiona. You know, something I did want to bring up to you is a lot of attention now on the latest plan by the Connecticut State University system to now consolidate the community colleges and making them more regional. Is that a concern for student parents who are trying to find resources with, I guess, the structure changing yet again?
Yeah, it's unclear, right? And I think I really don't have an answer because I think even the system, we are figuring that out, what that will mean for student parents. Thus far, as I mentioned earlier, the system unfortunately has not been very responsive to us as we've tried to propose some systemic change means of communication between the community colleges and the 4 CSUs in regards to these issues that affect student parents. I will say that I've been working with folks, and so, again, I mentioned earlier Michelle Van Coor down at Southern Connecticut State. We have hosted now 3 different work-life family conferences where we've invited members of the communities of the 12 community colleges, Charter Oak, and the 4 CSUs, and our union recently sponsored the most recent one, bringing together folks so we can begin to communicate with each other. And so I think there we hope to continue on that project.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. We do appreciate Fiona Pearson for you coming in to raise awareness about this issue on college campuses. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Today's show produced by Robin Doyen-Aiken. Thanks to Carmen Baskoff on the phones. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.